Abe drafted an appeal to the generous public, modern philosophers, leaders, and religionists on behalf of the League of Devotees. The activities of the League, he stated, would be to publish Back to Godhead in English with translations in many other languages, to educate young men and women for worldwide preaching, and to operate a press solely for printing transcendental literature. These programs would require an estimated 3,000 rupees per month, and he appealed for help. Abe concluded, Vrindavan is a sacred place of topmost importance, and the headquarters of this league is therefore situated here. Using the impressive new titles Honorary Professor of Gita, Bharatiya Vidya Bhavan, and Honorary Secretary of Hari Bhavan, Abe, with the assistance of Acharya Prabhakar, launched another attempt at rallying support for Back to Godhead and the League of Devotees. Within a few days, Acharya Prabhakar returned to his post in Bombay, and Abe was again alone in Vrindavana. He loved Vrindavana, yet with no means to publish and preach. He was not content there. If he were to travel, he might be able to enlist members for the league. He thought of Kanpur, which was nearby, a city of more than 100 big factories and many wealthy industrialists, some of whom he had met during his business travels. He decided to go. After printing some League of Devotee membership forms, he explained to Mahant Gopal that he would be away for a couple of months. The Mahant was surprised, although most elderly sadhus who came to Vrindavana stayed put and some even took vows never to leave. This quiet Baba was coming and going constantly. Abe preached actively in Kanpur, staying in various homes and canvassing for league members. As the guest of the Anandeshwar Satsang Mandal, he lectured regularly at the popular Parmat bathing gata on the Ganges. He especially made acquaintances among industrialists and educators, often sitting and conversing with them for hours, and many were impressed by his dedication and his soft spoken talks. But his collections were small. When he offered the wealthy magnates his constitutional membership, they usually opted in favor of the 2 rupees a year subscriber membership. He collected a few letters of appreciation, but after 2 months he left. After some months in Vrindavan, Abe decided to go back to Bombay and preach. In Bombay, he quickly broke off his association with the stripling Bharatiya Vidya Bhavan and moved out of the faculty residence there, staying a week at a time in the homes of various patrons. He tried to generate interest in his missionary activities. When a friend of Acharya Prabhakar's arranged for Abe to address Sunday evening crowds at a Bombay beach, Abe accepted. Following already established custom, he sat on a cushion, and the people gathered from 500 to 1,000 sitting and listening as he loudly spoke the philosophy of Bhagavad Gita. Abe spoke for several nights, and there were other lecture opportunities also. One week he spoke several times at a Bombay Vishnu temple. But Abe wanted to do more than deliver occasional lectures to uncommitted audiences. The conviction was growing within him that he should preach outside India. The idea, of course, had been there for some time. He had expressed it in his prospectus for the League of Devotees before gatherings at the Tata Memorial in Jhansi, during his meeting at the Birla Mandir in Delhi, and on many other occasions. Informally, he had expressed it hundreds of times to acquaintances, and he had woven his dream throughout his writings. He was ready to travel anywhere if he could fulfill Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's order to preach in English. In India, the English speaking population was small, so Abe continued to dream of going to the West. If he could travel to Bombay, Delhi, and Kanpur, why not to London or New York, where millions spoke English and had never heard the message of Lord Chaitanya? Writing to Mr. Ved Prakash, a Kanpur industrialist, Abe explained his idea. Lord Chaitanya said, Pranina Upakaraya, that is to say, for the benefit of all living beings concerned, while rendering first aid service in the battlefield. The Red Cross men, although equally disposed to all the wounded soldiers, they gave first preference to the hopeful ones. The hopeless ones are sometimes neglected. In India, even after the attainment of Swaraj, the mentality is predominant by made in London ideas. It is a long story, but in the nutshell, the leaders of India, in the name of secular government, they have engaged themselves in everything foreign. They have carefully set aside the treasure house of India's spiritual asset, and they are imitating the Western material way of life, constantly engaged in the acts of error of judgment, misgivings, imperfectness, and duplicity. India's Vedic knowledge is above all the conditional defects mentioned above, but we Indians at the present moment have neglected such wonderful Vedic knowledge. It is due to its improper handling. The Vedanta Sutra is presented in India by authorized persons of different camps, and as such, the people are being misguided. Newly sprung up national enthusiasm of the Indian leaders, industrialists, and plan makers have no time nor the desire to understand the message of Vedanta Sutra or even the Bhagavad Gita. You cannot do acts of humanity without proper guidance. So, my idea of preaching in the foreign countries means that they are rather fed up with material advancement of knowledge. They are seeking the message guidance of the Vedanta Sutra or for the matter of the Bhagavad Gita in an authentic way. And I'm sure India will again go back to the spiritual life when the principle is accepted by the Europeans, Americans, etc. Because the Indian people are now in the habit of begging after neglecting their own property. That was my viewpoint, but all the same, we must take only the opportunity of service. One way of expanding his way of preaching was to mail copies of Back to God and outside in India, and as an incentive for enlisting donors, he made it known that the donor's name would be printed on each copy. His ambition was to bring in large donations, run large printings, and send Back to God to more than 50 countries. He assigned quotas. America would receive 10,000 copies, Argentina 500, Belgium 500, Brazil 500, Burma 1,000, Canada 500, Chile 500, China 10,000, and so on, including 10,000 for Russia and 10,000 for England. But the donors and donations never appeared. The plans for Back to God was never realized. Abe found that while the people of India's educated cultured class were rejecting their own spiritual culture, the religiously inclined masses were being baffled by an array of conflicting, unauthorized doctrines presented in the name of Hinduism. An alarming example of this came to his attention as he was preaching in Bombay during the summer of 1958. Bhagavad Week was being publicized by a group whose teachings conflicted with the pure Parampara presentation of the Bhagavad Gita. The Bhagavata, Srimad Bhagavatam, was the devotional scripture par excellence, the literary incarnation of Krishna, and the organizers of Bhagavad Gita were using Srimad Bhagavatam to teach impersonalism and minimize Lord Krishna. So, friends, Abhay learned of the outrageous meetings and finally on July 28, 1958, he wrote to the Bhagavad Week leader Sri Ratnashi, imploring him to stay away from Srimad Bhagavatam. Here in this reading, we can see Abhay's struggle to publish the Back to Godhead magazine. He worked tirelessly day and night, traveling. Then he issued an appeal to the generous public and religious leaders on behalf of the League of Devotees, describing his plans to publish Back to Godhead, train preachers, and run a press which requiring 3,000 rupees a month. So he got some help from Acharya Prabhakar. He tried to revive the league in Vrindavan. Then he traveled to many cities. Then traveled to Kanpur first to get more members. So he preached vigorously and met many industrialists. Their support was very minimal. The donations were very less. Returning to Bombay after some months, he left the Bharatiya Vidya Bhavan and continued preaching while staying with various patrons. Large beach gatherings and temple lectures increased his exposure. Still, he longed for more substantial works. He wanted to travel to the Western world to preach. In letters, he argued that Westerners were disillusioned with materialism and that India would rediscover its own spiritual culture once it was valued abroad. Hoping to expand his mission, he planned worldwide distribution of Back to Godhead magazine, but donations never came. He was also concerned about misleading religious movements in India, such as the 1958 Bhagavad Week in Bombay, that distorted Bhagavatam. He wrote sharply to his organizer, warning against unauthorized interpretations. Hare Krishna.